While collecting the rent, the millionaire found a little girl shivering from the cold, sewing with rusty needles. The December wind howled through Portland's West Hills as Dominic Reinhardt pulled his Tesla into the run-down apartment complex on Burnside Street. At 43, Dominic had amassed a fortune in tech investments. Yet here he was, personally collecting overdue rent from one of his many properties, a task he'd normally delegate to property managers. But Westbrook Apartments was different. He'd inherited it from his late father, and something about the crumbling building nagged at him. 3 months behind, he muttered, reviewing the tenant file for Unit 307. Single mother, 2 children. Name, Vera Sokolov. Immigrant. The notes from his property manager suggested possible eviction proceedings after the new year. The stairwell reeked of mildew and something vaguely chemical. Dominic's Italian leather shoes echoed against the chipped concrete steps as he ascended. 3rd floor, end of the hall. He straightened his cashmere coat, knocked firmly. No answer. He knocked again, harder. Ms. Sokolov? It's the building owner. The faint sound of shuffling came from within. Then silence. Something wasn't right. Dominic used his master key, mentally rehearsing the speech about lease violations and payment plans he'd give this delinquent tenant. The door swung open to reveal a frigid apartment. His breath immediately clouded in front of him. The heat was obviously not working, or worse, shut off. The sparse furnishings spoke of extreme poverty. A worn sofa with exposed springs, a card table with mismatched chairs, bare walls except for a few children's drawings. "Hello?" he called out, stepping inside cautiously. That's when he heard it, the soft whimpering from the kitchen area. Following the sound, he found her, a girl no older than 10, hunched over the table. Her fingers were blue with cold, clutching a rusted needle as she methodically pushed it through fabric. She looked up at him, eyes widening with fear. "Please don't make us leave," she whispered in accented English. "Mama will have money soon. I promise." Dominic stood frozen, taking in the scene. The girl wore multiple layers of threadbare clothing. Next to her lay dozens of completed items, small fabric ornaments, hand-stitched dolls, and embroidered handkerchiefs, meticulously arranged. A half-empty glass of water and stale bread crusts sat within reach. The ancient radiator in the corner was silent, useless. "Where is your mother?" Dominic finally asked, softening his voice. "Hospital. 3 days now. My brother is sick too." She pointed toward a closed door. "I'm making things to sell. For rent. For medicine." As she moved her hands, Dominic noticed the band-aids wrapped around several fingers, small spots of blood seeping through. The rusty needle had clearly pierced her skin multiple times. "What's your name?" he asked, suddenly feeling the weight of his expensive watch on his wrist. "Nadia, please don't tell the authorities. They'll separate us. That's what Mama says. Please." Before Dominic could respond, a weak cough came from behind the closed door. Nadia immediately jumped up, grabbing a cup of water. "Mikhail needs medicine every 4 hours, she explained, moving toward the bedroom. "I keep track on paper." Dominic followed her, unprepared for what he was about to see. In the bedroom, a boy of perhaps 6 lay buried under a mound of blankets, his face flushed with fever, breathing labored. Beside the bed was a handmade chart with childish writing marking medication times and temperatures. The girl had been caring for her brother alone. For days, while sewing with rusty needles to pay rent to him, a man who wouldn't even notice the amount if it disappeared from his accounts. As Nadia tenderly helped her brother drink, Dominic felt something crack inside him, something he'd encased in marble and steel since his wife Rebecca's death 3 years ago. "Nadia," he said quietly, "I think you both need to come with me right now." Dominic paced the sterile corridor of Providence Portland Medical Center, his phone pressed to his ear. I don't care about protocol, Patricia. Find out everything about Vera Sokolov. Which hospital she's in, her condition, everything. And send someone to the apartment to pack essentials for the children." He ended the call, glancing through the glass at Nadia, who sat vigilantly beside her brother's hospital bed. The doctors had diagnosed Mikhail with severe pneumonia and malnutrition. His condition was serious, but treatable. Unlike the bureaucratic nightmare Dominic had stumbled into, 3 hours of phone calls had yielded almost nothing. Without legal guardianship, his hands were largely tied. Child Protective Services had been notified, but the overloaded system moved glacially. The only reason the children weren't already separated and placed in emergency foster care was Dominic's considerable influence and a sympathetic doctor who'd allowed them to remain together overnight. "Mr. Reinhardt?" a nurse approached. "There's a social worker here to speak with you." The woman who introduced herself as Elaine Hodges looked exhausted, her badge hanging from a lanyard adorned with cheerful cartoon characters that belied the gravity of her job. "I understand you found these children in one of your properties," she began, flipping through notes. "We've located their mother. Vera Sokolov is at Oregon Health Sciences University with advanced uterine cancer. She collapsed at her night cleaning job 3 days ago." Dominic felt the floor shift beneath him. "Cancer? Does Nadia know?" "I don't believe so. Ms. Sokolov has been in and out of consciousness. She has no listed emergency contacts, no family in the country." She lowered her voice. "The prognosis isn't good. Weeks, possibly a month." Through the window, Dominic watched Nadia arranging her brother's blankets, smoothing his hair with gentle fingers. Something about her movements reminded him painfully of Rebecca in her final days, always fussing over details despite her own suffering. "What happens to them now?" he asked, already knowing and dreading the answer. "We'll try to place them together in emergency foster care, but with Mikhail's medical needs and the current shortage of placements." She trailed off, her expression conveying what her words wouldn't. Sometimes siblings need to be placed separately, temporarily. Dominic knew what that meant in an overwhelmed system. He'd funded enough charitable initiatives to understand the reality behind the sanitized language. "They're from Ukraine originally," Elaine continued. "Arrived 4 years ago. Mother has been working 3 jobs. No father in the picture. Died during the conflict there. War refugees. Children who had already lost so much." "I'd like to visit their mother," Dominic said suddenly. Elaine looked surprised. "That's not really protocol." "I wasn't asking permission," he cut in, his voice regaining the edge that had helped build his fortune. "And I want all paperwork prepared for temporary guardianship while she's incapacitated." The social worker's eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Reinhardt, that's a significant responsibility. There are home studies, background checks." "I'm aware. Start the process." He handed her his business card. "My attorney will contact your office in the morning." After she left, Dominic entered the hospital room. Mikhail had finally fallen into a medicated sleep. Nadia looked up, her face showing the strain of days without proper rest. "The doctors say Mikhail will get better," she said, her voice small but determined. "I kept good records of his medicine just like Mama taught me." Dominic sat beside her. "You did everything right, Nadia. You're very brave." "Did you find my mother?" she asked, hope flickering in her exhausted eyes. Dominic hesitated, then made a decision that would alter his life irrevocably. "Yes, and I'm going to take you to her soon. But first, you need to rest. I promise I'll watch over Mikhail." As Nadia reluctantly curled up in the room's recliner, Dominic realized he'd just made a promise he couldn't possibly keep alone. For the first time since Rebecca died, he found himself praying, not to a God he'd long stopped believing in, but to his late wife's memory, for guidance in what he was about to do. Vera Sokolov's hospital room was dimly lit, the monitors casting a bluish glow over her gaunt face. At 36, she looked 20 years older, her body ravaged by cancer and years of grueling work. Dominic stood awkwardly at her bedside, a stranger bearing the weight of knowledge about her children. "Mr. Reinhardt," she whispered, her accent thickening her words. "The landlord comes himself to see dying tenant." A bitter smile crossed her cracked lips. "Mrs. Sokolov, I—" "Call me Vera," she interrupted. "And please, no pretending. Doctors told me this morning, stage 4, spread everywhere." She attempted to sit up, wincing. "My children. You found them? Nadia is too responsible, too adult already." Dominic helped adjust her pillow. "They're safe. Mikhail has pneumonia, but he's responding to treatment. And where will they go when I am gone?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. "I have no one here. My sister died in Kharkiv. My parents, too old, still in Ukraine. Foster system will separate them." The raw fear in her eyes was familiar to Dominic, the same terror he'd seen in Rebecca's when she realized she wouldn't live to see their planned future unfold. "I've applied for temporary guardianship," he found himself saying, "while you recover." Vera's laugh turned into a cough. Recover. Pretty word for dying slower. She studied him intently. Why would rich man want responsibility of immigrant children? What is your interest? The question hung between them, and Dominic realized he didn't have a rational answer. Nothing about the past 24 hours followed any logical pattern of his carefully constructed life. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said finally. "Cancer, too. We never had children. Couldn't have them. Finding Nadia, seeing how she cared for her brother, I can provide for them. Give them stability. So they are charity project? To ease your grief?" The sharpness in her tone belied her weakened state. Dominic met her gaze directly. "No, I don't know what they are to me yet, but I know they deserve better than being separated in an overloaded system." Vera seemed to deflate, her momentary strength evaporating. "You know nothing about raising children, nothing about our culture, our traditions. You're right, but I can learn, and I have resources. Resources." She tested the word. "Money is not everything for children. I know that." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady beeping of monitors. "Nadia," Vera finally said, "she sews because I taught her. Was my profession in Ukraine. Master seamstress. Here, I clean toilets and deliver food. But still, I teach her. The needle connects her to home we lost." Dominic thought of the rusty needles, the bleeding fingers. She's talented, dedicated. She needs proper tools, education, not rust and scraps. Vera's eyes filled with tears. "I worked so hard to save for her future, for design school someday. She has gift." The weight of this dying woman's unfulfilled dreams for her children settled on Dominic's shoulders. "I could make that happen," he said quietly. "And what do you want in return, Mr. Reinhardt?" The question startled him. "Nothing. I don't want anything. Everyone wants something." She closed her eyes briefly. "Bring my children tomorrow. I need to see them. To explain." When she looked at him again, her gaze was steel. "And bring lawyer with papers. I will sign temporary guardianship, but with conditions." Dominic nodded, understanding for the first time that this wasn't charity or impulse. This was a sacred trust he was asking for, the future of 2 children who had already lost nearly everything. As he turned to leave, Vera called after him. "Mr. Reinhardt, do you have photo of your wife?" Surprised, he pulled out his phone, scrolling to find a picture of Rebecca, laughing on their last vacation together in Santorini, the Mediterranean wind in her hair. Vera studied it for a long moment. "She had kind eyes," she said finally. "Maybe she sent you to my children." Walking out of the hospital into the cold Portland night, Dominic felt the strange weight of possibility, that perhaps Rebecca had indeed guided him to that apartment tonight. And for the first time since her death, the thought didn't feel like superstition or desperation. It felt like purpose. "I don't care if it's Christmas Eve, Jeffrey. I need the West Wing guest rooms prepared by tomorrow." Dominic paced his home office while Nadia and Mikhail slept upstairs, exhausted from their hospital visit with their mother. "And find me the best pediatric home care nurse in Portland. Money is no object." The visit had been devastating. Vera, rallying her strength, had explained to her children in gentle terms that her illness was serious. She hadn't used the word dying, but Nadia, perceptive beyond her years, had understood instantly. Mikhail, still weak from his own illness, had simply clung to his mother, confused by the tubes and machines surrounding her. Afterwards, with the children stepped out with a nurse, Vera and Dominic had signed temporary guardianship papers, with conditions meticulously added by Vera's court-appointed advocate. Ukrainian language lessons would continue, cultural traditions would be maintained, and, most importantly, if Vera's condition improved, the arrangement would be reassessed. They all knew this last condition was a fiction maintained for dignity's sake. Hanging up, Dominic wandered through his sprawling Lake Oswego mansion, 15,000 square feet of elegant, empty space. Rebecca had overseen its design, envisioning it filled with children and laughter. Instead, after her death, it had become Dominic's mausoleum, a shrine to their shared dreams, where he rattled around like a solitary ghost. He paused at the door of the room where Nadia now slept. The girl had barely spoken since leaving her mother's bedside, her face a mask of controlled emotion. Even when shown her new room, with its canopy bed and adjoining bathroom larger than her entire former apartment, she had simply nodded politely, asking only where her brother would sleep. Dominic had placed them in connecting rooms, sensing their need to stay close. Now, peering in, he saw the bed was empty. Alarmed, he pushed the door wider, only to find Nadia asleep on the floor beside a pile of blankets she'd fashioned into a makeshift bed. The sight hit him like a physical blow. Of course, she couldn't sleep in the plush bed. Everything here was too foreign, too overwhelming. He'd thrown these traumatized children into yet another alien environment without considering the psychological impact. As he debated whether to wake her, Nadia's eyes fluttered open. She sat up quickly, fearfully. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "The bed is beautiful, but—" "You don't need to explain," Dominic said gently, entering the room. "This is all very strange, isn't it?" She nodded, pulling her knees to her chest. "Mama is going to die, isn't she?" The directness of the question left no room for comforting lies. "The doctors are doing everything they can. But yes, her cancer is very serious." Nadia absorbed this, her face impossibly composed. "I promised her I would take care of Mikhail. That's why she taught me to sew, to cook, to give medicine. She knew this might happen." The realization that Vera had been preparing her daughter for her death, that Nadia had been carrying this knowledge like a stone, made Dominic's chest tighten. "That's a promise you shouldn't have had to make," he said. "Children shouldn't bear such responsibilities." "We are not American children, Mr. Reinhardt. Ukrainian children learn early that life is not fair." Her accent strengthened with emotion. "My father died defending our home. My mother worked until her body broke. This is our life." The wisdom and resignation in her voice tore at something deep inside him. "It doesn't have to be," he said, surprising himself with the ferocity of his response. "Not anymore. I made promises too. To your mother, and now to you. You and Mikhail will be safe. You'll have opportunities, and you will still honor your culture, your parents. Nadia studied him skeptically. Why? Why do you care about immigrants you never met before yesterday? It was the same question Vera had asked. This time, Dominic had an answer. Because, when I found you, I remembered something I'd forgotten. That we're all connected. That wealth means nothing if it isn't used to help others. And because, he hesitated, then continued, because my wife and I always wanted children. We had nurseries designed, names picked out. Then she got sick, and those dreams died with her. So we are replacement children. Nadia's candor was startling. No, Dominic said firmly. You are you, Nadia and Mikhail. Unique, irreplaceable. But you've reminded me that my heart isn't dead after all, that I can still care, still help. For the first time, Nadia's stoic expression softened slightly. Mama said your wife had kind eyes. She did. Dominic smiled sadly. Rebecca would have known exactly what to do right now. How to make you feel at home. What would she do? Nadia asked. Dominic thought for a moment. She would probably start by asking what would make you comfortable. What would help you sleep? Nadia hesitated, then whispered, At home, our real home in Ukraine. I shared a room with Mikhail. When bombs came, I would tell him stories to not be afraid. Understanding dawned. Would you like Mikhail to stay in here with you instead? She nodded, relief washing over her face. Then that's what we'll do. And tomorrow, we'll make this room feel more like yours. We'll find proper sewing materials, too. As Dominic helped move the still-sleeping Mikhail into his sister's room, arranging them both on the floor nest of blankets that felt familiar and safe, he realized he was embarking on the steepest learning curve of his life, steeper than building his company, harder than grieving Rebecca. He was learning to be a parent to children broken by the same world that had broken him. Christmas morning arrived with a crystalline beauty, frost patterns etching the windows of Dominic's mansion. For the first time in 3 years, he'd instructed his staff to decorate for the holiday, albeit hastily, given the children's unexpected arrival. A massive Fraser fir dominated the great room, adorned with ornaments Rebecca had collected over the years. Dominic had barely slept, instead spending the night ordering last-minute gifts online with same-day delivery and researching Ukrainian Christmas traditions. He discovered that for Orthodox Ukrainians, the main celebration traditionally came on January 7th, with Christmas Eve featuring a 12-dish meatless feast called Sviata Vecheria. Too late for that now, but perhaps they could incorporate elements into today's celebration. He found the children already awake, Mikhail's condition much improved, though still requiring regular medication. The boy's eyes widened at the tree. Santa found us here? He asked, his English more halting than his sister's. Before Dominic could respond, Nadia said something in Ukrainian, her tone gentle but corrective. Mikhail's face fell slightly. What did you tell him? Dominic asked. Nadia looked embarrassed. That Santa is just a story for babies. That Mama buys gifts when she can afford them. The pragmatism of a child who'd grown up too fast crushed Dominic's heart. And what if, he ventured carefully, this year could be different? What if we could pretend, just for today? Mikhail looked up hopefully, but Nadia's expression remained guarded. Why pretend what isn't real? Dominic knelt to her level. Sometimes pretending helps us remember joy. Like the stories you tell Mikhail when he's afraid. Something flickered in her eyes. Understanding, perhaps. She exchanged a look with her brother, then gave a small nod. The morning unfolded with cautious wonder. The children unwrapped practical gifts Dominic had managed to secure. Warm clothes, books, art supplies. But it was the special packages that transformed the day. For Mikhail, a plush lion that roared when squeezed. "Like brave Ukrainian," he declared, puffing out his small chest. And for Nadia, a proper sewing kit with high-quality needles, threads, fabrics, and a beginner's guide to fashion design. When she opened it, Nadia's composure finally cracked. Tears filled her eyes as she ran her fingers over the gleaming scissors and perfectly ordered thread spools, so different from the rusty tools and scavenged materials she'd been using. "Mama told you," she whispered. "She told me you have a gift," Dominic confirmed, "that you might like to study design someday." The girl clutched the kit to her chest. She always said, "Nadia, your hands will create beautiful things when mine cannot." Her voice broke, but she should be here to see it. Dominic sat beside her on the floor. "I know, and I can't replace her. I would never try. But I can help you fulfill the dreams she had for you." Later that afternoon, as a personal chef prepared a dinner incorporating traditional Ukrainian dishes alongside American holiday fare, Dominic received a call from the hospital. Vera's condition had deteriorated overnight. The oncologist recommended bringing the children soon if they wanted to say goodbye. How did one tell children their mother wouldn't live to see the new year? Dominic postponed the conversation through dinner, watching Nadia help Mikhail with his borscht, the boy laughing for the first time since Dominic had met him. After dinner, he found a surprise waiting in his study, a small, crudely wrapped package on his desk. Inside was a hand-stitched handkerchief with his initials, clearly made by Nadia, with her new supplies. A note in careful handwriting read, "Thank you for saving Mikhail, for the medicine." He found Nadia in the kitchen, helping the chef clean up despite protests that it wasn't necessary. "This is beautiful," he said, holding up the handkerchief. "How did you make it so quickly?" She shrugged. "I am fast with good needles, not rusty ones. Nadia, I need to tell you something," he began, leading her to a quiet corner. "Your mother. The hospital called." Understanding immediately dawned in her eyes. "We need to go now." "Yes, I'll get Mikhail ready." "No," she said firmly. "He said goodbye already. He doesn't understand dying. It will only frighten him. I will go alone." "Are you sure that's what your mother would want?" Nadia nodded, her face set with determination beyond her years. "She told me when I visited, when you were talking to the doctor. She said, 'Let him remember me strong, not like this, please.'" Dominic recognized in that moment that he would need to learn when to guide these children and when to trust their instincts, instincts forged in circumstances he could barely imagine. As they drove through the quiet Christmas evening toward the hospital, Nadia clutched a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "What's that?" Dominic asked gently. "I made Mama a scarf, with the new materials." She stared out the window at the holiday lights. "She won't need it, but I want her to see that I will be okay, that I can still create beautiful things." Dominic gripped the steering wheel tighter, blinking back unexpected tears. In that moment, this child's courage and compassion humbled him completely, making his years of grief and self-isolation seem selfish and small. "She'll love it," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "And yes, Nadia, you will be okay. I promise." As the hospital loomed ahead, illuminated against the darkening sky, Dominic realized that this Christmas, a day he'd dreaded for weeks, had somehow become about birth rather than death. The birth of something new and fragile, a makeshift family formed through loss, bound by promises and sustained by hope. Vera Sokolov was buried 3 days after Christmas in a small Orthodox ceremony. Standing between Nadia and Mikhail at the graveside, Dominic watched as the priest swung the incense burner, the smoke curling up into the gray Portland sky. The children had insisted on traditional mourning customs, with Nadia explaining each ritual to Dominic in hushed tones. The past week had been a blur of hospital visits, funeral arrangements, and legal meetings. Permanent guardianship papers were being processed, with the court expediting the case given the circumstances. Child Services had conducted their initial home evaluation, impressed by the accommodations Dominic had quickly arranged, including a full-time Ukrainian-speaking nanny and culturally appropriate meals. But bureaucracy and logistics were the easy part. Navigating the emotional landscape was infinitely more complex. "Will Mama be with Papa now?" Mikhail asked as they returned to the car after the service, his small face solemn beneath his wool cap. Nadia answered in Ukrainian before Dominic could respond, then translated, "I told him yes, that they are together, watching over us. Do you believe that?" Dominic asked quietly as he helped them into the car. Nadia's eyes met his, weighing her response. "I believe they would stay if they could. That their love doesn't disappear." She adjusted her brother's scarf. "Sometimes believing helps us live. Like pretending on Christmas." Her wisdom continued to astonish him. Back at the house, while Mikhail napped, exhausted from the emotional day, Dominic found Nadia in the room he'd converted into a small sewing studio for her, complete with a proper cutting table and sewing machine. She sat motionless before her mother's sewing box, the one item she'd insisted on retrieving from the apartment. Its wooden surface was scarred and worn, the once bright Ukrainian folk designs faded with age and use. "This came with us from Ukraine," she said without looking up. "Mama's grandmother made it. Inside are buttons from my great-grandfather's military uniform, thimbles older than me, needles that sewed wedding dresses for generations." Her fingers traced the lid. "This is all that's left of our family history." Dominic pulled up a chair beside her. "May I see?" She carefully opened the box. The interior was lined with faded velvet, compartments meticulously organized despite their contents' humble nature. Each item seemed to carry stories beyond its simple function. "Mama always said, 'Hands remember what minds forget,'" Nadia continued, lifting an antique bone thimble. "When I sew, I feel connected to her, to Ukraine, to everyone who came before." She finally looked at him. "How do I keep being Ukrainian here? How do I teach Mikhail to remember who we are?" The question pierced Dominic to his core. In his rush to provide material comfort, had he considered their cultural and spiritual needs? "I think," he said slowly, "that we learn together. You teach me about your traditions, your language. I'll find resources, connections to the Ukrainian community here. We preserve your history while building something new. And what do you get from this arrangement, Mr. Reinhardt?" The formality of her address reminded him how new and fragile their relationship remained. "Please, call me Dominic," he said. "And what I get?" He paused, considering. "I get purpose, connection. For 3 years, I've been half alive, running businesses but not really living. You and Mikhail have reminded me what matters." "Your wife," Nadia said. "You miss her like I miss Mama." "Yes, but you were alone. No children to be strong for." The observation wasn't accusatory, merely factual, yet it struck Dominic with its truth. Without children depending on him, he'd had the luxury of retreating into his grief. "Being strong doesn't mean not grieving," he offered. "We can miss them together." That evening, as January snow began falling outside, Dominic found himself doing something he hadn't done since Rebecca's diagnosis. He opened the photo albums. Seated on the living room floor with Nadia and Mikhail, he shared stories of his wife. Her passion for marine biology, her terrible singing voice, her dream of starting a foundation for children. In turn, Nadia translated Mikhail's excited descriptions of their father, a literature professor who could recite poetry from memory, and their life in Kharkiv before the conflict. She showed Dominic photos saved on an old thumb drive. Their modest apartment filled with books, family gatherings around a table laden with traditional foods, her parents dancing at a cousin's wedding. "They look happy," Dominic observed. "They were," Nadia confirmed, "until the war. Then everything changed." As January unfolded, they established new routines. Mikhail began attending a private school with strong ESL support. Nadia, assessed as academically advanced despite educational disruptions, was placed in a similar program with additional Ukrainian language maintenance. Twice weekly, they attended cultural events at Portland's small but vibrant Ukrainian community center. And each evening, Dominic carved out time for what they came to call family stories, sharing memories, photographs, and traditions from both their pasts. It was during one of these sessions, 3 weeks after Vera's funeral, that Nadia handed him a small package. "Mama asked me to give you this," she said, after she was gone. Inside was a letter and a small embroidered cloth star. The letter, written in careful English during Vera's final days, read, "Mr. Reinhardt, when you came to collect rent, you found instead 2 children in need. Perhaps this was God's plan. The star I send is talisman in our culture, protection for travelers on difficult journeys. We are all travelers now. My children through life without me, you through parenthood without preparation. I ask only this: let them remember Ukraine in their hearts while finding home with you. And remember, Mr. Reinhardt, in saving them, perhaps you also save yourself." With gratitude, Vera Dominic looked up to find Nadia watching him intently. "She made the star while in hospital," she explained. "Her last sewing." That night, after the children were asleep, Dominic sat in his office, the embroidered star before him, contemplating the extraordinary responsibility he'd undertaken. He was no longer merely a guardian providing shelter and resources. He was the caretaker of a cultural legacy, of family memories, of childhood itself. For the first time since agreeing to take the children, genuine fear gripped him. What if he failed them? What if his wealth and good intentions weren't enough to heal what war, immigration, and loss had broken? The star gleamed in the lamplight, each stitch placed with purpose, despite failing strength. Vera had created beauty even while dying, a lesson in itself. Dominic carefully pinned the star above his desk calendar, a daily reminder of promises made and the unexpected journey ahead. Spring brought Portland to life with cherry blossoms and daffodils, mirroring subtle changes within Dominic's household. 4 months after the children's arrival, the mansion had transformed. Ukrainian books mixed with English on shelves, Mikhail's artwork covered the refrigerator, and the formal dining room now hosted regular family meals instead of business dinners. But beneath the surface harmony, tensions simmered. The novelty had worn off, replaced by the reality of day-to-day life with traumatized children. "I won't go!" Mikhail's scream echoed through the hallway one Monday morning, followed by the crash of something breakable. Dominic rushed upstairs to find the boy barricaded in his room, a shattered picture frame on the floor. Nadia stood outside, speaking rapid Ukrainian through the door. "What happened?" Dominic asked, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. "Today is Father's Day celebration at school," Nadia explained, frustration evident. "He says he won't go because you are not his real father and Papa is dead." The words stung more than Dominic expected. He'd been careful never to position himself as replacing their father. But over months of bedtime stories, weekend outings, and helping with homework, he'd begun to hope they were forming genuine bonds. "Let me try," he said gently. Kneeling by the door, Dominic spoke softly. "Mikhail, it's me. I understand why you're upset. You're right. I'm not your father. No one could replace him. Silence from within, but the sobbing quieted. Your papa was brave and loved you very much. I would never pretend to take his place. But I care about you too, and I'd be honored if you'd let me be part of Father's Day. Not as a replacement, but as someone else who loves you. The door cracked open slightly, revealing Mikhail's tear-streaked face. You love us? He asked, his voice small. The question caught Dominic off guard. He'd been careful with such words, fearful of overstepping. But looking at this vulnerable child and his equally vulnerable sister, the truth was undeniable. Yes, he said firmly. I love you both. Very much. Mikhail studied him with solemn eyes, then extended a small hand, holding a crumpled photo, himself as a toddler on his father's shoulders. Can I take Papa's picture to school too? To show both? Relief flooded Dominic. Of course you can. Later that evening, after dropping off forms for the children's first American passports, another milestone in their evolving status, Dominic found Nadia in her sewing studio, hunched over an intricate piece. Since enrolling in a youth fashion program, her skills had advanced remarkably. The room was now covered with sketches and fabric swatches, a vision board displaying torn magazine pages of Ukrainian-inspired modern designs. Mikhail's teacher called, he said, leaning against the doorframe. He did well today after the rough start. Nadia nodded without looking up, her needle moving with practiced precision. The silence between them stretched uncomfortably. Are you upset about something? Dominic finally asked. She set down her work with deliberate care. You said you love us. I do. Love is complicated, she said, finally meeting his gaze. Sometimes people who love you still leave. Dominic entered the room, sitting across from her at the work table. Like your parents did. They didn't choose to leave, she corrected sharply. They were taken. I'm sorry, you're right. He recognized the landmine he'd stepped on. That was a thoughtless comparison. Nadia's fingers traced the pattern she was stitching, an intricate trizub, Ukraine's national symbol. The court says you are our permanent guardian now. Yes, the final hearing is next month. What if you change your mind? What if we become too difficult? What if your business needs you to move away? The questions tumbled out, revealing fears she'd apparently been harboring for months. What if you find someone to marry and they don't want Ukrainian children? Dominic was stunned by the depth of her insecurities. Despite his efforts to create stability, she still expected abandonment. Nadia, look at me, he said gently. I will never change my mind about you and Mikhail. You aren't temporary in my life. You're my family now, the most important part of it. You can't promise that, she insisted. Adults always think they can promise forever, but they can't. The maturity and pain behind her words broke his heart. At 14, Rebecca had been worrying about school dances and soccer practice. At 10, Nadia worried about being orphaned again. You're right that I can't control everything, he acknowledged, but I can promise you this. As long as I'm alive, I will be there for you and Mikhail. My home is your home. My resources are for your future. And if something ever happened to me, I've already arranged for your continued care and education. Her eyes widened. You have? Yes. My attorney updated my will last month. You and Mikhail will always be provided for, no matter what. Nadia absorbed this information, her expression unreadable. Then she reached into her sewing basket and extracted a small package wrapped in tissue paper. I was going to give you this for American Father's Day, but maybe now is better. Inside was a handcrafted tie, the silk midnight blue with subtle embroidery along one edge, tiny stars matching the one Vera had made for him. I used the same pattern Mama taught me, she explained. Stars to guide travelers home. Dominic ran his fingers over the exquisite needlework, recognizing the hours of careful labor it represented. More than that, he recognized the sentiment behind it. Acceptance. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll wear it to your school presentation next week." "It's silly," she shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Just a school project." "It's your first design showcase. It's important." She hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her. "Do you think Mama would be proud of my designs?" "Without a doubt," Dominic replied. "But I think she'd be even prouder of how you've taken care of Mikhail, of how brave you've both been." For the first time since he'd known her, Nadia allowed herself to cry in his presence. Not the controlled tears of the funeral, but deep, body-shaking sobs of grief and release. Dominic moved around the table, carefully putting an arm around her shoulders, ready to withdraw if she stiffened. Instead, she turned into his embrace, allowing herself to be held like the child she still was, despite her adult responsibilities and wisdom. "It's okay to miss them and still be happy sometimes," he murmured. "It's okay to build a new life while honoring the old one." "Is that what you did? After your wife?" Dominic considered the question honestly. "No. I stopped living when Rebecca died. I just existed, worked, accumulated more wealth I didn't need." He smiled sadly. "It took finding you and Mikhail to wake me up again, to remind me that loving people is worth the risk of losing them." As spring deepened into summer, the household settled into more comfortable rhythms. There were still difficult days, Mikhail's nightmares about the war, Nadia's occasional withdrawal into silence, Dominic's learning curve on everything from school projects to adolescent emotions. But increasingly, there were also moments of genuine joy. Mikhail's delight in swimming lessons, Nadia's pride when her designs won a youth competition, weekend hikes in the Columbia River Gorge, where they all felt the simple pleasure of sun on their faces. They were building something new and fragile, a family cobbled together from broken pieces, held by threads of shared experience and growing affection. Not replacing what was lost, but creating something equally precious in its own right. "Mr. Reinhardt, and Irina Petrenko is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." The receptionist's voice crackled through the intercom at Dominic's downtown office. The name meant nothing to him. "Did she mention what this is regarding?" "She says it's about the Sokolov children. She claims to be their aunt." Dominic's blood ran cold. In the 9 months since bringing Nadia and Mikhail into his life, no relatives had ever surfaced. Vera had been explicit that they had no family in America, and the Ukrainian relatives, elderly grandparents, had been unreachable during the legal proceedings. "Send her in." The woman who entered his office was perhaps 40, with the same high cheekbones and direct gaze as Vera. She wore a simple dress and carried a worn leather handbag, her entire demeanor suggesting someone who had traveled far and under difficult circumstances. "Mr. Reinhardt," she began, in heavily accented English, "I am Irina Petrenko, sister of Anton Sokolov, the children's father. I have been searching for my niece and nephew for nearly a year." Dominic gestured for her to sit, his mind racing. "I was told Vera had no living siblings, and that her husband's family had all perished in Kharkiv. My brother Anton and I were estranged for many years," she explained. "Political disagreements. When the conflict worsened, I fled to Poland. It was only after reaching Warsaw that I learned Anton had been killed." Her eyes filled with tears. By then, Vera and the children had already left for America under refugee program. "I have been trying to trace them since." "How did you find them now?" Dominic asked, his tone more defensive than he intended. "Ukrainian community is small, even across oceans. I saw online post about young Ukrainian designer named Nadia Sokolov winning Portland Youth Competition. The photo," She extracted a folded printout from her bag. She looks exactly like her grandmother. My mother. Dominic studied the clipping from the local newspaper. Indeed, he had encouraged publicity around Nadia's win, proud of her accomplishment. Now that decision haunted him. Vera passed away 6 months ago, he said gently. Cancer. I became the children's legal guardian. Irina closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the news of her sister-in-law's death. I am too late to help Vera then. But not too late for my brother's children. The implication hung heavy in the air. Ms. Petrenko, Nadia and Mikhail have been through tremendous trauma. They're finally stable, adjusting to their new life. They're thriving in school, making friends. With American family, yes? Learning American ways? There was no malice in her question, only genuine concern. Mr. Reinhardt, I understand you have given them comfortable home. But do they speak Ukrainian daily? Do they know their family history? Their cultural traditions? Do they remember where they come from? The questions hit with uncomfortable precision. Despite his efforts, the cultural center visits, the Ukrainian nanny, the books, he knew their heritage was inevitably diluting in the face of daily American life. I've done my best to honor their background, he said, but I can't replace what was lost. No, she agreed, but I can. I am blood. I knew their father from his birth. I have family stories, photographs they have never seen. Their grandparents are still alive in western Ukraine, safer region now. They ask about their grandchildren constantly. Dominic felt the ground shifting beneath him. 9 months of building trust, of midnight comfort during nightmares, of small triumphs and setbacks, of growing love, all suddenly threatened. What exactly are you proposing? He asked, his businessman's instincts taking over to mask his emotional turmoil. I have applied for residency in Canada, she explained. Toronto has large Ukrainian community. My application is approved. I want to take children there, to give them connection to their heritage, while still offering opportunities for education, safety. And if I refuse, they are legally under my guardianship now. Irina studied him thoughtfully. You would fight to keep children from their only blood family? From chance to reconnect with their roots? She softened her tone. Mr. Reinhardt, I do not come as enemy. I come for children's best interests. Perhaps we can find solution together. The remainder of the meeting passed in a blur of exchanged contact information and tentative agreements to meet again, with Dominic insisting that any introduction to the children be gradual and supervised. By the time Irina left, tension had formed at the base of his skull, a throbbing reminder of what was at stake. That evening, watching Nadia help Mikhail with his English homework at the kitchen island, Dominic struggled to find words to explain the day's development. How did one tell children who had lost everything that their past had suddenly reappeared? Demanding attention. You're very quiet, Nadia observed, her perceptiveness as sharp as ever. Bad day at work? Not exactly. Dominic took a deep breath. Someone came to see me today. Someone connected to your father. Mikhail's head snapped up, his pencil clattering to the counter. Papa? Your father's sister. Your Aunt Irina. She's been looking for you since the war separated your family. Nadia's face drained of color. Aunt Irina? Papa said she left Ukraine, that she was never coming back. She went to Poland, Dominic explained gently. She's been trying to find you for a long time. Why? The question was sharp, almost accusatory. Why now, when we are finally okay? Mikhail looked between his sister and Dominic, confusion evident. We have aunt? Real aunt? Like in stories? The hope in the boy's voice contrasted painfully with Nadia's evident distress. Dominic chose his next words carefully. She would like to meet you both. She's moving to Toronto and He hesitated, then decided they deserved the complete truth. She would like you to consider living with her eventually, among Ukrainian community there. No, Nadia stood abruptly. We are not leaving. This is our home now. Mikhail's lower lip trembled. But Nadia, don't you remember? Papa said Aunt Irina makes best honey cookies for Christmas. And she has funny dog. That was before, Mikhail. Before Papa died. Before Mama got sick. Before everything. Nadia's voice rose uncharacteristically. Do you want to leave Dominic? Leave our school? My design program? The boy's eyes filled with tears, caught between his sister's anger and his own confused emotions. I don't know, he whispered. Dominic stepped in, placing a gentle hand on Nadia's shoulder. No one is making any decisions right now. I would never send you anywhere you don't want to go. I promise to keep you safe, remember? But even as he spoke, the reassurance, doubt crept in. What if living with blood relatives, surrounded by cultural connections, was truly better for them? What right did he have to keep them from rebuilding those severed ties? Was his desire to keep them born of love or selfishness? That night, after the children were in bed, Dominic sat in his study staring at the embroidered star Vera had sent. Let them remember Ukraine in their hearts while finding home with you, she had written. But what if remembering wasn't enough? What if they needed more immersion in their culture than he could provide? He picked up the phone and called Dr. Levinson, the child psychologist who had been working with Nadia and Mikhail since their arrival. I need guidance, he said simply. Their aunt has appeared, wanting to take them to a Ukrainian community in Canada. I don't know what's best for them anymore. Grace, what do the children want? Dr. Levinson asked. Nadia seems adamant about staying. Mikhail is confused, torn. Dominic, the doctor said gently, in situations like this, there's rarely a perfect answer. Children need stability, which you've provided. They also need cultural continuity and family connections when possible. The question isn't which option is perfect. It's which imperfect option best serves their complex needs. The conversation provided no easy answers, but it clarified the path forward. This wasn't about his feelings or even Irina's rights. It was about giving Nadia and Mikhail agency in their own story. As dawn broke over Portland, Dominic made a decision. He would arrange a meeting between the children and their aunt, but with no predetermined outcome. He would support whatever connection developed naturally, whether that meant occasional visits or a more significant change. And most importantly, he would ensure that Nadia and Mikhail's voices were central to any decision about their future. However much it might hurt to loosen his hold on this unexpected family, he owed them that much. The freedom to choose their own path, even if it led away from him. The meeting with Irina was scheduled for Saturday brunch at a neutral location, a private room at a downtown restaurant that served Eastern European cuisine. Dominic had prepared the children as best he could, showing them the few photographs Irina had emailed. Herself with their father as teenagers, their grandparents outside a traditional Ukrainian home, a family gathering from before the children were born. Mikhail had been bubbling with excitement for days, asking endless questions about the aunt he barely remembered. Nadia, conversely, had retreated into watchful silence, her sewing machine running late into the night as she processed her anxiety through creation. When they entered the restaurant, Irina was already there, nervously arranging a small pile of gifts on the table. Her face lit up upon seeing the children, her hand flying to her mouth. Boże mi, she whispered. So big now, so beautiful. Mikhail approached cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as Irina knelt to his level, speaking softly in Ukrainian. Nadia hung back, her body language protective, positioning herself slightly in front of her brother despite his enthusiasm. You have Anton's eyes, Irina said to Nadia in English, respecting the girl's distance. He was stubborn, too. His good trait helped him survive many difficulties before. She trailed off, then recovered. Before he met your mother and had his beautiful children. The initial awkwardness gradually eased as they shared a meal of familiar Ukrainian dishes. Irina had brought treasures from the children's past. Family photographs saved by grandparents, a traditional embroidered shirt that had belonged to their father, recordings of folk songs they had heard as babies. For Nadia specifically, she had brought something extraordinary, their grandmother's pattern book, containing generations of traditional embroidery designs. "Your father wrote to me when you were small," Irina explained, as Nadia reverently turned the yellowed pages. He said, "My Nadia has the family gift. Her fingers already know the threads. I kept this safe, hoping someday to give it to you." Dominic watched as Nadia's careful reserve cracked slightly, her fingers tracing patterns that connected her to ancestors she'd never known. For the first time, he fully understood what he couldn't provide them. No matter his resources or intentions, this bone-deep connection to their origins. As the meal progressed, Irina shared her plans for Toronto, the Ukrainian school there, the cultural center, the community of refugees and immigrants maintaining traditions while building new lives. She spoke of video calls with grandparents, of summers perhaps spent in the peaceful western regions of Ukraine once she was established. "Your bedroom would have window overlooking garden," she told Mikhail, who listened wide-eyed. "And Nadia, there is fashion program at local college with Ukrainian designer as teacher." Throughout the conversation, Dominic maintained a composed expression despite the growing hollowness in his chest. Everything Irina described sounded perfect, ideal for children needing to reconnect with their heritage. He found himself unable to formulate any logical argument against her proposal beyond his own desperate desire to keep them in his life. "What about Dominic?" Nadia asked suddenly, her first direct question to her aunt. "If we went to Toronto, would we never see him again?" The question hung in the air, revealing Nadia's hidden fear. Irina looked thoughtful. "Of course you would see him. Mr. Reinhardt would always be an important person in your lives, special guardian during hardest time." "He's more than that," Nadia insisted, her voice gaining strength. "He's family now, too." Dominic felt a surge of emotion at her declaration. "Perhaps," Irina suggested carefully, "we do not need to decide everything today. Maybe I stay in Portland for a few weeks. We spend time together, learn to be family again, then discuss future." Relief washed over Dominic. "That seems sensible. I can arrange accommodations for you near us. And perhaps," Irina continued, her gaze meeting his with unexpected warmth, "Mr. Reinhardt joins us sometimes? For meals? For outings? I would like to know man who has cared for my brother's children." The proposal evolved over dessert. Irina would stay for 1 month in a guest house on Dominic's property. They would spend time together as an extended family unit, with no pressure for immediate decisions. The children would continue their school and activities uninterrupted, while building a relationship with their aunt. On the drive home, Mikhail chattered excitedly about Irina's stories, while Nadia remained thoughtful, clutching the pattern book to her chest. "She seems kind," Nadia finally said, as they pulled into the driveway. "Not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Dominic asked. "Someone who would try to take us away immediately. Someone who would say you aren't really family." She looked at him directly. "I was ready to fight her." Dominic smiled sadly. "I don't think this needs to be a battle, Nadia. Your aunt wants what's best for you, as do I. Sometimes adults can find compromises." Later that night, unable to sleep, Dominic found Nadia in the kitchen, making tea the way her mother had taught her. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, joining her at the counter. She shook her head. "Too many thoughts. Want to share them?" When Mama first got sick, she began, stirring honey into her tea. She told me, Nadia, home is not a place. Home is people who love you. I didn't understand then. I thought she meant I should accept losing our apartment, moving somewhere smaller. Dominic waited patiently as she gathered her thoughts. Now I think she meant something else, that I could find home in different places, with different people. She looked up at him. You made a home for us here, but maybe Aunt Irina could too, in Toronto. Yes, he acknowledged, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. She probably could. But I don't want to choose, Nadia continued, frustration evident. Why must children always choose between pieces of their hearts? Why can't we have both? The question struck Dominic with the force of revelation. Why indeed? He was a man of considerable resources, with businesses on both U.S. coasts and international connections. Irina was building a new life in Toronto, flexible and still taking shape. Maybe you don't have to choose completely, he said slowly, an idea forming. Maybe there's a middle path. Over the following weeks, as Irina became a regular presence in their lives, a solution emerged organically through countless conversations and thoughtful negotiations. Dominic opened an office in Toronto, requiring his presence there regularly. He purchased a second home in the Ukrainian neighborhood where Irina was settling. The children would split their time, school years with Dominic in Portland, where their education was well established, and summers plus select holidays with Irina in Toronto, immersed in cultural connections and extended family relationships. It wasn't perfect. It would require coordination, flexibility, and regular reassessment as the children's needs evolved. But it honored all the essential threads of their complex identities, their Ukrainian heritage, their American opportunities, and the unexpected family bonds formed through both blood and choice. 1 year after finding a shivering girl sewing with rusty needles in a cold apartment, Dominic sat on his patio, watching Nadia teach Irina how to use the computerized sewing machine he'd given her for her 11th birthday. Mikhail played nearby, constructing an elaborate fort, with materials from both Ukrainian and American building sets. Dr. Levinson's words returned to him. There was no perfect answer, only imperfect options that best served the children's complex needs. The arrangement they'd created was indeed imperfect, requiring sacrifice and compromise from everyone involved. But it wove together the essential strands of what these children needed: cultural identity, family connection, stability, and opportunity, into something stronger than any single thread could be alone. Like Nadia's increasingly sophisticated designs, it combined traditional elements with modern innovations, creating something entirely unique. A family defined not by conventional boundaries, but by love that transcended blood, borders, and circumstances. 5 years later, the Portland Convention Center hummed with excited conversation as attendees gathered for the Northwest Emerging Designers Showcase. Dominic adjusted his tie, the midnight blue silk with embroidered stars that Nadia had made him years ago, and checked his watch. 15 minutes until the high school division presentations began. Nervous? Irina asked, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee. In the years since entering their lives, she had become not just the children's aunt, but Dominic's friend and co-parent. Their initially awkward relationship evolving into genuine respect and affection. Terrified, he admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. But not as nervous as Nadia. She will be brilliant, Irina said confidently. She has worked so hard on this collection. At 16, Nadia had developed into a formidable talent, her designs increasingly sophisticated, a unique fusion of traditional Ukrainian techniques with contemporary American silhouettes. Today's showcase represented her first major public presentation, the culmination of 2 years' work, and a potential gateway to design school scholarships. Mikhail bounded up, now a lanky 12-year-old equally comfortable in both his worlds. The summer months in Toronto had given him fluency in Ukrainian and connection to his roots, while his Portland life had made him a confident American teen with a passion for both soccer and traditional Ukrainian dance. "They're letting family backstage before it starts," he announced. "Nadia's freaking out about one of the embroidery details." They found her in the preparation area, surrounded by her collection, 7 complete outfits that told the story of her journey from Ukraine to America. Her models, fellow students from Portland's Arts High School, were being fitted into her creations, a flurry of activity and nervous energy. "It's all wrong," she muttered when she saw them, gesturing to a beaded detail on the final piece, a modern evening dress with traditional Ukrainian embroidery cascading down one shoulder. "The symmetry is off. I should have used the pattern from grandmother's book, not tried to create my own variation." Dominic recognized the perfectionism that drove her, the same quality that had once led a young girl to sew through the night with rusty needles to support her family. "Let me see," Irina said, examining the beadwork with expert eyes. "Nadia, this is not wrong. It is evolution. Your grandmother would understand. Each generation adds to tradition, makes it their own." "The judges might not appreciate the innovation," Nadia fretted. "They might think I don't respect the traditional forms." "Anyone who knows Ukrainian embroidery will recognize both your respect for tradition and your artistic vision," Dominic assured her. "That's what makes your work special. It honors the past while creating something new." A slow smile spread across Nadia's face. "That's what you said about our family once, that we were honoring different traditions while creating something new together. And was I wrong?" he asked gently. She looked around at the 3 of them, Dominic in his business suit with her handmade tie, Irina wearing a modern blazer over a traditional Ukrainian blouse, Mikhail in basketball shoes with a braided friendship bracelet from his Ukrainian summer camp. Their twice-yearly transitions between Portland and Toronto had become seamless, their lives enriched rather than divided by the dual citizenship they now all shared. "No," she conceded. "You weren't wrong." As the showcase began, Dominic, Irina, and Mikhail took their seats in the audience. The program listed Nadia's collection title, Threads of Memory, A Journey Between Worlds. When her turn came, her models walked the runway to music that blended contemporary beats with traditional Ukrainian folk melodies. Each outfit told part of her story, from the children's ensemble inspired by what she and Mikhail had worn fleeing Ukraine, to professional attire incorporating subtle nods to their heritage, to evening wear that boldly celebrated cultural fusion. The final piece, the one Nadia had worried about, drew audible gasps from the audience. The model wore a gown that appeared traditionally American from the front, but as she turned, the back revealed an intricate tapestry of beadwork forming a modernized trizub, Ukraine's national symbol, integrated with the Portland skyline. "She's telling our whole story," Mikhail whispered, recognizing the symbolism. When the judges announced Nadia as the division winner, qualifying her for a national competition and design school scholarship consideration, Dominic felt his chest might burst with pride. Watching her accept the award, confidently thanking her supporters in both English and Ukrainian, he marveled at the transformation from the frightened, frozen child he'd discovered 5 years ago. The celebration dinner afterward was held at Katerina's, a Ukrainian restaurant owned by a family from their Toronto community who had recently expanded to Portland, another thread connecting their 2 worlds. As they shared traditional dishes and American-style cake, Nadia presented Dominic and Irina each with a gift, custom-designed scarves incorporating symbols meaningful to their unusual family. "I have an announcement," Irina said as they finished their meal. "I have been offered teaching position at Portland Community College, Ukrainian language and cultural studies." She looked at Dominic meaningfully. I am thinking perhaps to stay in Portland more permanently. Not just summers. The implications hung in the air. A potential consolidation of their divided living arrangement, bringing together the family's far-flung pieces. What about the Toronto house? Mikhail asked, his expression conflicted. Our friends there? The dance group? We would still visit, Irina assured him. But perhaps shorter trips, not whole summers, special occasions. We could convert the guest house into a permanent home for you, Dominic suggested, mind already racing with possibilities. Give you your own space while keeping us all connected. They looked to Nadia, who had been quietly processing the suggestion. As the oldest, she had always carried the heaviest burden of their dual existence, responsible for both her academic progress in Portland and maintaining cultural connections in Toronto. I think, she said carefully, that home really is where the people you love are gathered, not a specific place. She smiled at the parallel to her mother's words years before. If we're together more often, that seems right. Sit. Later that evening, after Irina had retired to the guest house and Mikhail to his room, Dominic found Nadia in her studio, sketching ideas inspired by the day's success. I'm incredibly proud of you, he said, settling into what had become his usual chair in her creative space. Not just for the award, but for who you've become. She set down her pencil. I've been thinking a lot about Mama today, whether she would be proud too. Without question, Dominic assured her. She saw your potential even then. I've been saving something, Nadia said, opening a drawer in her desk. For the right moment. She withdrew an envelope, the paper worn from being handled many times. Mama gave this to me the day before she went into the hospital for the last time. She made me promise not to open it until I found my path. I think today might be that day. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and removed a letter written in Ukrainian. As she read, tears filled her eyes. What does it say? Dominic asked gently. Nadia translated, her voice steady despite her tears. My beloved Nadia, when you read this, I will be watching from somewhere beyond. Do not grieve too long for me. Instead, take the gift your hands possess and create beauty in a world that desperately needs it. Your father always said you carried the family legacy in your fingers. Generations of women who spoke through thread and needle when words failed. Remember your roots, but do not be bound by them. Ukraine will always be in your heart, but your future may bloom elsewhere. This is not betrayal. It is the natural order of life. I do not know what path opened for you to receive this letter, but I trust you have found guides to help you when I could not. Treasure them. Family is not only blood, but those who choose to love you when it is difficult. With every stitch you sew, know that my love continues in the movement of your hands. Your Mama, always. Silence filled the studio as the words settled around them. Dominic reached out, covering Nadia's hand with his own. She knew, Nadia whispered. Somehow she knew you would find us, that we wouldn't be alone. Perhaps she did, Dominic agreed. Or perhaps she simply had faith that the world contains more kindness than we sometimes believe. As midnight approached, Dominic stood on his back terrace, contemplating the extraordinary journey of the past 5 years. From a man isolated by grief to the center of an unconventional family. From a landlord collecting rent to a father in all the ways that truly mattered. Above him, stars pierced the Portland night. The same stars that shone over Ukraine, over Toronto, over all the places their family's story had unfolded. Like the embroidered stars on his tie, they formed patterns that connected distant points, creating meaning from what might otherwise be random, isolated lights. 5 years ago, he had found a girl shivering with cold, working with rusty needles to survive. Today, That same girl created beauty that moved people to tears, her talents nurtured by the strange, wonderful family they had pieced together from the fragments of broken lives. It wasn't what any of them had planned. It wasn't perfect or easy, but it was theirs. This family stitched together across continents and cultures, bound by choice as much as circumstance. And in its imperfection lay its ultimate strength. The knowledge that love, like the most enduring fabric, could be torn, patched, rewoven, and transformed, yet still hold fast against the coldest winds life could summon. In a world that often seems irreparably divided, our deepest connections can emerge from the most unexpected encounters. This story reminds us that family isn't defined solely by blood or borders, but by our willingness to recognize our shared humanity in moments of vulnerability. True wealth isn't measured in property portfolios or investment returns, but in the courage to open our hearts after loss, to reach across differences, and to create new forms of belonging that honor both heritage and hope. The rusty needles of our past experiences don't limit us. They can become tools for creating something beautiful and enduring when placed in the right hands. Perhaps most importantly, this story teaches us that healing is rarely a solitary journey. Just as Dominic, Nadia, Mikhail, and Irina discovered, our broken pieces come together most powerfully when we stop trying to recreate what was lost and instead build something new that honors all parts of our complex identities. In that imperfect, beautiful weaving together lies our greatest strength and our most profound redemption. If this story moved you in any way, share your thoughts in the comments. What moment touched you the most? And from 0 to 10, what score would you give it? Your feedback helps us keep creating meaningful and emotional stories. Don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and explore more touching stories right here on the end screen. Thank you for watching,